All right, welcome in. It is Friday. It is time for Full Court Press. Another parlay winner yesterday on the show. We got the good number on the show with Jackson State. That got there as they lost by 7. And then Rob Vino got us home. Rob, what was your parlay like? Why can't I remember this? I remember like 5.
It was William and Mary team total.
William and Mary, that's right. For some reason, I had it in my head that it was Murray State because we also talked about that, which also won. So a lot of winners given out on the show yesterday. Talked about that Manhattan number maybe being too big. That one. So yeah, the frustration for me continues because I come on here and talk about all these games that win, and then the ones I'm actually getting to the window with for clients are not winning. So that's very, very frustrating. Kind of got word that Temple was going to be without 3 players last night. Already like Davidson, and it didn't matter. They got outplayed start to finish. So we'll keep plugging away. That's what you're here for is opinions. We've got them, an hour worth of them. And hopefully we'll find some winners. And then hopefully for my clients, some of those will translate to actual client play winners because that's where we're at right now. We're just trying to win bets, Rob. And we're going to start the feature game today. I went to this matchup. So not where it is tonight, of course. The feature game today is going to be Villanova, Wisconsin out at Fiserv Forum. So kind of a neutral floor. Obviously, it's going to be pro Wisconsin, but that's Marquette's home floor. It's not in Madison where Wisconsin plays. But what I was going to say, Rob, is I actually got to see this game back in 2017 as part of the NCAA tournament out in Buffalo at the KeyBank Center, where Wisconsin pulled the upset as the 8 seed, knocked off number 1 seeded Villanova. That was trying to remember who that maybe Chris Jenkins was on that team.
All right.
Yeah, I can't really. Josh Hart would have been on that team. Ethan Happ was on Wisconsin back then. So just a little fun fact. That was a second round game out here in Buffalo, New York. Today, Villanova is the underdog in this matchup. The tables have turned. Villanova is not what they were back with Jay Wright, 2017, those Nova teams that eventually won a national championship. But they have brought in Kevin Willard to restore the greatness to Villanova. Now, here they are, kind of on the road, but it is neutral. 5-ish point underdog against Wisconsin. National TV, how are you seeing this one? Nova, Wisconsin in Milwaukee tonight.
It hasn't been done against the best of competition, but you have to be impressed with the way Nova stacked wins. Beating the people they should. We now know very well that if you get smashed by Michigan, that's not that big of a deal because everybody's getting smashed by Michigan. But otherwise, the Villanova schedule and results under Kevin Willard so far look pretty good as he brings his team along. We talked about him early on. I think right off the bat, they played BYU. We had that game featured here. It seems to me they've come a fairly long way in a short period of time here. Now, Wisconsin, I think what you fear here, at least if you're me, what you fear here betting side is that Wisconsin has that explosive, flammable, ignitable type of team where they could go on a run here and maybe Nova can't get back in. But I'm not sure that that's going to be the case. I try to talk myself out of that because I like the dog plus the points here. Numbers go on the other way, but I still think Nova's capable man for man to stick with Wisconsin here. Wisconsin, for what it's worth, not as good a defensive side as what they once were. You could almost say they've sacrificed defense for offense, the new wave of Greg Gard here. And I think that benefits Villanova a little bit. When you go through numbers on these teams, analytics and whatnot, you don't find a huge group of disparities, Adam, where I could say point to matchup this versus this, that versus that. So I think we have 2 teams. I would say Wisconsin's probably a little higher up in the pecking order of the Big Ten than Villanova is of the Big East. And I could be wrong on that because the Big East isn't as strong a conference this year. But it's an interesting matchup, like you say, on a floor that's not Wisconsin campus. I just think the way Villanova's playing right now under Willard suggests that they can hang within this number. I'm not sure Wisconsin can get out and run away. Where the total is concerned, you could talk me into looking over. I didn't play but I could look toward over because there is a part of me that thinks that Nova's going to have to try to match buckets at some point with Wisconsin. So we'll see. Blackwell's been tremendous for the Wisconsin side. He's obviously the guy you're focused on defensively if you're Villanova. But I'll take my shot here. And I didn't, but on the radio I will, or on the show I will. I'll take my shot with Villanova plus the points.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I almost wish we were like, I almost wish this was in Madison and they were giving like the bigger bump for home court. Like, you know what I mean? Like the way this is priced. So I'm kind of making, as I make my number here, my number's a little bit like my numbers suggest that Wisconsin is the right side against this number. Okay. Like, and that is, so here's my thing. I'm not going to give a huge bump for home court on a neutral floor. Like, even if it's like regionally close, I've had good sort of, results over the years where I don't go crazy, like pricing this like a Wisconsin home game. And I think the books do that as well. Like even though it's around the corner, the books are pricing this more like a neutral court game. If this game was in Madison tonight, I think you'd be seeing like Wisconsin -7, something like that. In which case, I'd be much more likely to take the 7 with Villanova because I just think those points are more valuable. You get up right around 3 possessions. The problem for me with Villanova is I really like Willard and I like the way they're playing, but I came into the season thinking, okay, there's this roster's a little too mid-major-ish for me to like give Villanova like full marks. Duke Brennan is not like a great sort of post defender at this level. Some of the guys that they brought in that were like their sort of gets in the portal, Brennan, like Askew, were guys that I didn't think really elevated the team to being like, okay, well, Nova's back, right? Because of course, what everyone wants to compare Villanova to is what they were in those last couple of years under Jay Wright, which they certainly are not that yet. With that being said, Kevin Willard is a far better coach than Kyle Neptune, and what Villanova had in previous years. And I look at this Villanova team, kind of going back to what you're saying. They play hard, they defend. Like I have really no issue with how they're playing. I do think there's a little bit of a ceiling with the talent, but in this case, like I definitely think that they can be scrappy enough to sort of hang around here with Wisconsin. Their guards can pressure the Wisconsin guards, and that's the thing. If Villanova's guards can really D up in this game, I think this is going to be really hard for Wisconsin to pull away, which is why I would much rather have like this game in Madison and catch 6.5 or 7 than have to, that there's a big difference there. 4 to 4.5 is a huge difference than 6.5, 7. And so because my number suggests that it should be more like 6.5, 7, and it would be if it was in Madison, I don't know if I want to just take the 5. I think 5 is the best you can do out there right now. But again, I think it's the only way I would play it. I don't think I want to lay here against like this is like the type of game that Nova could steal, in my opinion. They could go out and steal this game. So Nova or pass for me.
Yeah, it's interesting, Adam. A couple of points that you made. The fan base at Pfizer, obviously different than the fan base at home. Much like I can compare it to UConn when they play at Stores. It's a totally different set of people attending that game than it is when they play in Hartford. You get more casual, older fans. You'll probably get tonight, maybe not as loud, not as helpful. So obviously the bump is not the same as you said. Wisconsin off of the embarrassing loss could be a problem here as well. Maybe they're fired up, but I will say this, watching the post-game press conference afterward, and I don't know that we give them enough credit for this as of yet, but Fred Hoiberg's team plays pretty good defense. And they shut Wisconsin down. That 90-60 game, and Hoiberg commented on it afterwards about how they've been, since Rank Mast came back, a much better defensive team. So Villanova kind of fits that bill, as you mentioned, as a team that can pressure. And the last thing I'll say here real quick is that it does come down to a battle of tempos. Obviously, Villanova wants to be very methodical, and Wisconsin would like to speed it up. I always say I think the home team can have their way for better than 50% of the time. But in this instance, I'm not so sure Villanova has a way of making you play their type of game. There's a couple of blowouts on the Wisconsin resume, one being against Big East Providence, which is somewhat scary, but Providence doesn't play anywhere near the style that Villanova plays. So different animal, different game styles make matchups. I kind of think like you that Villanova could hang around here, but I'm not willing to play it.
All right, let's move on. Garth is in here with a game I wanted to talk about anyway. Don't worry, I'll get to. I know we've got a kids' day 11 a.m. tip. I'll get you. We'll get that in before 11 o'clock. But let's go to Garth here. Thank you for the donation, much appreciated as always. One of the more interesting matchups on the slate tonight. So definitely deserves some time on the show. I know he is a Western Kentucky alum, and he wants to hear about Tulsa and Western Kentucky. I'm going off of memory, but I'm pretty sure if Tulsa doesn't blow that Kansas State game, which we nailed on this show, Tulsa easily covered, but they had that game won, and I believe they gave up like 6 points in the final 45 seconds. I think that's their only loss on the season. And I just went, yes, they are 10-1. And the one loss was at Manhattan, Kansas, on a game they pretty much had won. So incredibly impressive start to the season for Tulsa, Rob Vino. Here, they hit the road to Western Kentucky. And my instant thought was just watching Tulsa the last few times out, they got to have a dud coming up at some point. The way they play, you can't. I forget what game it was, but we had another one that we got right where it's like a super jump shot reliant team was finally going on the road. I don't remember. It was this week. I can't remember what game it was, but at some point, if you have to shoot the ball extremely well to win games, which is what Tulsa has done, like at some point going on the road is going to be a problem. The question is Western Kentucky the problem? That's the question. I don't know that's, we'd have to rely on Garth to let us know what kind of atmosphere, but we'll be at, in this game for this game tonight. But I think over the years, Western Kentucky has been pretty solid at home. He says he kind of thinks Tulsa might cover the 2.5. I say they have to shoot it well to do that. Rob Vino, are they going to shoot it good enough on the road again to cover this number?
Boy, what they've shown us so far would indicate yes, especially when you just take the analytics piece of this, Adam, where Tulsa is the number 4 3-point percentage shooting team in the nation, and Western hasn't defended the 3 real well. And I think, a lot of times these teams that play rapid fire basketball, 94-foot open court style, I've said this before, a lot of times your 3-point percentage allowed is higher simply because in games where the court is opened up and there's space everywhere and you're trying to track your man, more open threes happen. It's just a product of the system where Western Kentucky is involved, that Western Kentucky is involved in. It doesn't mean they can't defend. It just means that shot opportunities are going to be there for Tulsa. Open looks in this pace game. If they get open looks, it's obviously a different gym, different rims, et cetera, et cetera. But boy, oh boy, so far so good as far as they are concerned. I'll say this about Western. Their losses, I mean, if there is such a thing as good losses, it's impressive to only lose by 5 to Vanderbilt at this point in time. I don't care where the game was played, was a neutral, one of the tourneys. And then to come back and play South Florida at that pace to overtime, fairly impressive as well. So they haven't been beaten by anybody that they shouldn't have been beaten by, which in my mind keeps me in a positive mindset where Western Kentucky is concerned. But I would think this. I just feel like the game's played too fast. The game's too widespread. It's not really a system you want to play against Tulsa because Tulsa's going to find the open threes, and threes count more than 2, and Western actually doesn't shoot either very good. They are predicated on basically winning the high octane matchup. And I don't know that Tulsa falls prey to that. I'm trying just quickly to go through. It's really hard to find comps to Western Kentucky. And as of this moment, Tulsa hasn't played one. So you don't even know how they're going to react to this style of play, which would put another question mark in your mind. If I was put to the fire here, Adam, I think I would lean Tulsa. I kind of don't understand why people would push this game to the under. Now, Garth is saying he does lean under, but I don't know which side is going to be affected by the other's defense. I probably would push back at that and say over.
So I think, see, here's the thing. Like I think if you're gonna get an under in this game, it's gonna be because you finally had the bad shooting night from Tulsa.
Right.
That they're due to they're gonna have one at some point because they have shot just lights out pretty much all season. And theoretically, like this would be the type of game, the type of environment. Western Kentucky, they've shown that they can play. They do have a pretty, over the years have had a pretty decent home court edge. Friday night, like them having to go on the road, like this, I guess just from a spot standpoint, my gut says this is the spot where maybe they don't just hit every shot. So that's, I think, your path, because, you're looking at a number in the 150s. I mean, if you get an inefficient, poor shooting night from one team, you're probably not going over 156. Like that's a pretty big total. The other thing though, like Western Kentucky, I feel like they have been a little bit they have a higher ceiling offensively than we've seen so far. So like that's what makes this such a tough handicap is I think there's some offensive regression positive coming for Western Kentucky and this offense. And then negative for Tulsa. But if it doesn't, if Tulsa comes out and they're just hitting shots, like you said, I'd be a little concerned because I do think Western Kentucky is going to be able to score here. I'd be a little concerned on the total. So again, that's why I'm glad we got to talk about it. It's a fascinating game, very good matchup, I think. But I think you're kind of banking on Tulsa having a bad shooting night to either hit the under or to hit Western Kentucky. If they come out and shoot the ball like they've been shooting it, they're probably going to win and cover. And again, do what you can do with that. But that's going to be an interesting game to watch. Okay, I know people are going to want to watch this, so let's just get it over with right now. Education Day out in Rob Vino's neck of the woods, Fairfield, Connecticut, the Pitt Center, home of the Sacred Heart Pioneers. I went to this game last year. Ears are still ringing from the game. It's all kids. I don't give a real home court bump for the Education Days because these kids just scream for anything. It's not like they're necessarily cheering on the home team. They just like to yell. They go nuts when that one Travis Scott song comes on. That's what the kids' days are. So not a huge bump for home court here for me for Sacred Heart just because it's Education Day, because these kids are just going to yell the whole time. It actually just creates an atmosphere for both teams. Jim Root brought up earlier in the week that, it's tilted toward the home teams and some of these 11 a.m. tips. Though, yeah, I guess we saw that. I mean, it didn't work out for Drexel in the game I went to, but yesterday Charleston Southern came out and just absolutely buried North Florida, hit the over, both things we talked about on this show. Big happening here for this game. Anquan Hill has been ruled out for Sacred Heart. Now, he's an important player, but he also missed their last game, and he's also been kind of playing through injury. So I don't know that I'm going to make as big of an adjustment to the number as I normally would for him being out because he hasn't been as effective of late and he didn't play in their most recent game. The problem for me here is I like both of these teams relative to what the market thinks they are. So I would have probably leaned Sacred Heart with Anquan Hill. Without him, I'm less inclined to play Sacred Heart, but I don't necessarily want to play Dartmouth here. I think the spread flipped from Sacred Heart -1.5 to Dartmouth -1. Could be some scoring though. There could be some scoring. Dartmouth can light it up. They shoot the ball better than I think people think they do. And Sacred Heart doesn't do much on the defensive end. So I don't know, Rob Bino, do you have a totals take? I can't make heads or tails of the side here.
Yeah, it's a difficult side, Adam, for sure. I mean, the Rocky Mountain trip that Dartmouth made probably puts their strength of schedule in a higher category than what Sacred Heart has played so far. So, I mean, you could make the slight claim Dartmouth is better tested, step down in class, et cetera, et cetera. If you're looking at total here, the only advantage really, I think, Adam, is the one you just pointed out, where Dartmouth is such a good shooting team and Sacred Heart is such a poor defending team that you would probably want to isolate that and look at Dartmouth team total. Both of these teams, because it's a pick 'em game, they're both asked to get to 77 in this contest. Who do you think is more likely? Maybe both get there. And to get to over, they probably both have to get there. But I think if I were to choose which one I would prefer, it would probably be the Dartmouth side to get to 77 points here. The early start, of course, like you say, Jim Root brought it up. This is not that big of a travel situation. Hanover, New Hampshire, to Fairfield, Connecticut. It's, car ride, I will say. It's a little bit extensive car ride. If you're sitting in a car, you're probably going to drive a little bit to get to Hanover. But still, it's not one of those massive road trips. And it's not really an intimidating gym. Although the whole section, Park Avenue, Park Street, I forget, Sacred Heart's on Park Street, I think, all refurbished, very, very nice nowadays, much like Fairfield U. But I would probably lean toward Dartmouth team total if I had to play. I don't have to, so I won't. But that's what the advice I would leave, Dartmouth team total over 76.5.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple times. So I came into the season pretty high on Sacred Heart. I went as far as to say I think they could be like a dark horse in the MAC. And in typical Sacred Heart fashion, they find a way to always have injuries. It's been the same thing the last couple of years, where it's like someone's always out. And in this case, it's Anquan Hill. But they are probably one of the deeper teams in the MAC, where it's like their 1 through 9 is pretty good. Anthony Latina is a tremendous coach. The fact that Sacred Heart has been as competitive, I mean, going from the NEC to the MAC is a decent step up. And I mean, he's had his team competitive ever since they got there. He's been there for like 13 years now. Like he's a tremendous coach, and this team has some talent. They got Deshaun Giddens from Florida International. I believe he's his brother. So Deshaun Giddens was the best player pretty much for FIU, which was not a good FIU team, but the last couple of years, they got him to come up to Sacred Heart because his brother's on the coaching staff, and he's been their best player, leads the team with 15.3 points per game. So it's like, even without Hill, like Sacred Heart still can absolutely win this game. But the infuriating thing about Sacred Heart is they just like, I had them and I won this bet. I played Sacred Heart earlier this year at Central Connecticut State. I cashed. They lost the game, Rob, 108 to 106 in overtime. And I mean, they just couldn't be bothered to even put a hand up at any point in time during that game. Thankfully, they scored 106 and we covered like the 3.5 or whatever the number was. But that's the problem at times. And this Dartmouth team can shoot a little bit. So I'm kind of with you. I think Dartmouth team total over is probably the best play to play the 11 a.m. game, because I think Dartmouth's going to get their points regardless if Sacred Heart does or not.
Yeah, it's interesting here, Adam, real quick. You were talking about shooting regression before from Tulsa and how well they've shot the basketball. Just combing over the stats here, Kareem Thomas, backup shooting guard for Dartmouth, leads the nation, shooting 69.6% from three. And it's a small sample size, 16 of 23, but some guys don't hit 16 of 23 in practice. So Dartmouth, there's a few guys on this side that can light it up. And as you mentioned, Sacred Heart, just not a good defensive team at this point in time. So we'll see. Could turn into somewhat of a track meet, high-scoring game, but I would probably isolate the Dartmouth team total. I think that's the one thing you could depend on in this instance.
Yeah, Kareem Thomas, I think he hasn't missed a three in like 3 games. He's made every single three he's attempted in Dartmouth's last 3 games. So yeah, on fire would be an understatement. And it should be, hey, at any rate, we got 11 a.m. basketball. It's going to be a competitive game. So that's awesome. I love some daytime hoops. All right, the folks in the chat, a lot of people talking about Seton Hall, Providence, and this is a Big East battle and one that deserves some time on the show. Rob, I again, this is very similar to the first game we talked about, where my number is off a little bit from, like, my handicap says Seton Hall, but I felt like I should have been maybe getting a couple of more points. Maybe it's because of where I have Providence home court rated. Sometimes, like that's one thing you can count on no matter what. Like this type of game, a Friday night at what I always will still call the Dunk. I know it's the Odd now, but it'll always be the Dunkin' Donuts Center to me. I'll give them a bump for home court in a game like this. Coming into the season, I probably would have loved Providence in this spot at this number, but I got to be honest. Providence is probably one of the teams I'm out on the most. I've come on the show and talked about maybe the team doesn't get along, and I have good, I have good knowledge that like maybe everyone doesn't gel on that team from a Providence grad that I'm friends with that's still very close to the program. Now they've got some talent. They've still got some really good offensive players, but I just don't like this Providence team. And I kind of thought 2.5 was a little low, but the market's saying, no, that was probably a good number because now we're looking at Providence -1. Shaheen Holloway, what I'll say about him, when he has kids that buy into what he wants to do on the defensive end of the floor, his teams always overachieve. Go back to the St. Peter's days. If his team is willing to buy in and defend the way he wants to defend, those teams always overachieve. That's what we're seeing out of Seton Hall so far this year. What do you think, Rob? The Pirates on the road tonight, they're now only a 1-point dog, which means they pretty much have to win to cover. Do you want Seton Hall in this spot?
I'd prefer to have Seton Hall just off of what I've seen so far this year, Adam. I mean, to your point about, and Shaheen Holloway talked about this prior. I'm trying to look back at the beginning of the season, the first time we covered Seton Hall. I guess maybe it was when they played NC State. I don't think we talked much about earlier games before that, but Shaheen Holloway, I saw an interview where he was praising his team's pit bull style of defense up and down. And then they come out and they beat NC State and they push USC to the limit, two very good offensive teams. And then they destroy Washington State and then they shut down Kansas State. And this defense just continues to show up to the point where now they're the 13th rated defensive adjusted team in the country. They don't allow anything inside the arc. They're fifth in the country, only allowing 42.4% inside the arc. Providence, however, it's what makes this game such a great contrast. Their offense has been on fire. And Shaheen Holloway commented on it. Here's a quote from him. They've got 5 guys on the court that score at all times. This is one of the better teams in our conference for sure. To go up there is one of the toughest places to play. Kim English, in response to talking about his team, I'm excited to watch these guys grow. We believe in this team. Even with some losses, I'm really excited about this conference season. You know what? If the underclass and the upper class don't get along, it hasn't showed in the results, right? They just continue to score points. They continue to win games. But I'm kind of with the defensive underdog in this case. I know it's on the road. Defense does travel. I just think these finesse offensive style teams get out of sync quicker when the opponent shows you you're not going to get what you usually get really easy. We're here all night. And I think Seton Hall is always there all night for 40 minutes. I'm sure Holloway has some kind of locker room address to his team to get them fired up to be on the road. It's not enough points for me to play, but I do think Seton Hall is the team I would prefer in this game. I just like what I've seen so far against really high-class offensive opponents. I won't say overall opposition, but I'll say the offenses that they've faced have been really good, and they've been really good defensively against them.
Yeah, listen, Kim's gonna work out the locker room stuff. He's a great locker room guy. Like I got to meet him very briefly down in the Bahamas a couple of years ago. Was down there for the Baha Mar thing, and Providence was one of the teams there. And like I have no, the whole thing came from the fact that like maybe he, the upperclassman transfers in, like, it felt like they maybe deserved something. And it seems so. Your comment, what he's saying is, I love the freshmen I brought in. That's translation is what Kim is saying right there. I want to see them grow. He loves the freshmen that he's recruited because, like, you got to understand still, like, some of these guys probably still, it probably like they as much as they like the portal, I'm sure they love like bringing in their own guys. And it's like, hey, like I found this guy and like these are like my guys. So I could totally see that. Being like a thing. The biggest thing, the far bigger concern for me here, Providence plays no defense. The defense has been atrocious. And Seton Hall, like if you defend them, you're going to be able to win. Because even though Seton Hall's played as good as they've played, Like if you can lock down their offense, you can beat Seton Hall. And I don't know that Providence can do that. I'm going to go to the chat. Trevor says, Bud Clark, Merrimack, shout out to the MAC conference. He was great for Joe Gallo and Merrimack last year. Feels this team on the floor. He's so good. Yeah, like at times last year for Merrimack, he was a one-man show. Like they didn't have a ton of offense, and he just kind of did everything. I think he's like the perfect guy for Seton Hall offensively on a team that's more defensive oriented. To have a guy like Bud Clark has been huge. And to your point, Rob, Shaheen Holloway's not in the business of just like going out and giving out compliments that they're not deserved, because he has also been a guy that's completely ripped his team when they don't give the defensive effort. A couple years ago with Kadari Richmond, he felt like that team should have been so much better, and he would straight up come out and be like, we're just not tough. We just don't want it. Like, and think about how good of a player he is, right? And so he's been willing to call out when he doesn't have that effort. So the fact that he is praising their defensive effort should tell you that they're buying in. And any Shaheen Holloway team that buys in, I mean, the guy got St. Peter's to the Elite Eight. I still don't know how that is humanly possible. But when his teams buy in on the defensive end, they will always overachieve. So I lean toward the dog, though I really wish I was getting a better number. That is an awfully small number to lay on the road, or to get on the road, in my opinion.
Real quick here, Adam, I'll just throw one last thing in, because we basically have branded Seton Hall, rightfully so, branded them as a defensive-oriented team. They're 5-1 over their team total in the last 6 games. Tonight's total for Seton Hall is 75.5 against a non-defensive finesse-style Providence team. Seton Hall, in those 6 games, 5-1 team total over, they've scored 75+ in all of those. So it's not like they're in the 60s playing these games anymore. To the comment about Bud Clark and the offensive firepower, you like to catch these things early in this business and be a little proactive, but there's potential for Seton Hall to get up and over this 75.5 here tonight. It's got a little bit of juice attached to it, but it's the right opponent. It probably will be played at the right pace. You'll get enough chances, opportunities. And as I mentioned, Seton Hall, there's a lot of opponents that they've played in Providence's offensive weight class, and they've done the job against them. And they've scored. I mean, can we correlate K-State to Providence in some fashion?
Oh, yeah.
K-State, and that K-State game, Seton Hall goes out there and absolutely rips them 78-67. So they held the offense down. They got 75+. I guess the point is we may have to keep an eye on the Seton Hall offense being good enough to complement the defense.
All right, I'll move on to this comment. Tarleton feels so Steve Duke says Tarleton feels like an automatic bet today. Listen, Tarleton has been very odd this year in terms of like who they've played, when they've played. They got hit with the injuries all at once. Now, I can tell you that they're as full strength as they've been. Dior Johnson came back the other night against Mississippi Valley State, as did Chris Mpaka. So those were the guys that had been out for a while. Now Mpaka barely played, and Dior played his normal minutes. And when Dior Johnson plays for Tarleton, 37 minutes. The last couple games he's actually played, Rob, he had 27 against Mississippi Valley. He had 29 against Rice, 33 in a non-board game, 42 against Baylor. This is, of course, Dior Johnson, who, if he could have kept himself out of trouble, would probably still be at Pitt or at UCF or at one of the other 10 colleges he was at before he ended up at Tarleton. But, hey, Billy Clyde got himself a good one, being able to grab him for the year. And since he's back, that is massive for Tarleton. Now, 15-point spreads. Listen, Florida A&M is not they're not totally incapable. I've caught a couple of their games this year. They looked, I thought they looked great last time out against Jacksonville. So I actually, they've played Jacksonville twice this year. And the reason for that is they played them in an MTE, and they covered as a double-digit dog in that first game. And then they won at home as an underdog last time out. But like, if you look at their sort of games that they've played, you've got the bye games, which they've gotten smashed in every one. 30-point loss to Georgia, 37-point loss to UCF. South Florida dropped 102 on them. And then they have the non-board games, which you have to throw out. So the problem is the only real comparison to Tarleton on their schedule is Jacksonville. And they played well against that team, but I wonder how much of it is matchup based. Here they have to go to Stephenville. It'll be a home game for Tarleton. They don't get many of these against, D1 schools in the non-conference. So yeah, I guess Steve, I kind of feel the same way you do. It feels like Tarleton can kind of name their score here if they want, and they're healthy. So, that's one where it's like these 15-point spreads can be tough, but my gut is with yours. I kind of think that they probably roll. And, they might not be getting the full sort of love from the odds makers because I don't know that anyone really understands that they're at full strength because they just don't get that. There's not public, it doesn't get publicized like it does with other teams. So Dior back and the fact that he played 37 minutes earlier this week against Mississippi Valley is massively encouraging for Tarleton. Rob, since if you have nothing to add there, that's fine. You could take the floor and throw a game that you want out. I don't know if you know your parlay leg.
You see me just going over some notes here because I do want to talk about what I would consider the mid-major game of the night, Adam. And not just because I'm a homer for Belmont, but Belmont UCI is a terrific game tonight out on the West Coast. And I do have a slight opinion on this one, but let's just really quick. The difference between the two teams is obvious, right? Under Russell Turner, Cal Irvine, always, well, I guess always is a strong word. Let's say 99.9% of the time is the best defensive team in that league. Belmont's going to run into that tonight. Cal Irvine has put up really good defensive numbers so far this year. Number 2 in the country in effective field goal percentage allowed. Of course, Belmont's a team that loves to score. Great three-point shooting. Tyler Lundblade, a guy Casey Alexander called the best pure shooter he's ever coached, doing nothing to tarnish that statement by shooting 41% from three. And they've been a juggernaut offensively this year. And they've had some results here early that, even to me, a guy who roots for them, had to take a second look at the way they beat Toledo, et cetera, et cetera. Belmont's been there. But in this game, I thoroughly disagree with the movement on the total. 4-point move. And it's just like whenever, and I noticed this only because I'm always interested in Belmont, but it seems like the market, as soon as Belmont's on the board, they just bet over. Knee-jerk, mechanical reaction. Belmont's in the game. It's got to go over. This game is now up to 149.5. I will say this about the Belmont Bruins this year, not noted over the years, 2 decades worth. When they were playing in the bird cage for Rick Bird, et cetera, they were never known as a good defensive team. They're playing great defense by Belmont standards this year. You got 2 teams on the floor that can actually defend. And UCI is not a great shooting team. So I think Belmont can keep UCI's point total down. I think Belmont's going to have a difficult time finding the shots they have. And their offense, Adam, I know there's times where we can get into X's and O's of offense on this show, but the offense that Belmont runs is almost a joy to watch at times. They do what they do, and they execute it perfectly. But I just think that this is a team, and this is a weird road trip, Nashville to Irvine, not something Belmont generally does, but I do like this. It gives me the feel of, you'll remember the name of the Saturday. I can't remember. Remember when they used to pair strong mid-majors against one another on a Saturday?
Yeah. It used to Do I remember? I was at Siena when that was going on. That was Bracket Buster Saturday. That was the literal, my reason to basically breathe, and they took it away. It was the best thing ever. Siena got to go out to Boise one year. It was awesome. Yeah. I could do a whole show on why they should bring that back.
They should definitely bring that back. This would be like a bracket buster game, one of major interest on both sides. But I'm just going to wrap it up here quick before I ramble too much about Belmont and just say that I think this total is probably too high. I don't think these teams get to 150 tonight, and that's what they're asked to do. Unless we see overtime situation, I think you probably get a Belmont UCI under 149.5. Won't use it as my parlay leg. Just wanted to bring that game up because, as you like to say, I think that would deserve some attention on the show.
Rob, it really does feel like a bracket buster game. So the reason they did away with that was part of the rule was so ESPN would pick the matchups. And then the deal was if you got picked, they would do whatever matchups they wanted. And then you had to give the team a return game the following year. Okay. So like Siena got sent out to Boise one year. The great part about that was Boise had to come play us in Albany. And it was like a home game that we probably normally would not have gotten. The reason that, it's funny you make that comparison is these two teams played in Nashville last year at Curb. And it was I don't know if you remember that game, but it was Belmont led like the whole game and then choked it away like in the last few minutes where they had like a big halftime lead and UC Irvine came out of nowhere and like stole the game. Just went nuts for like the final 8 minutes of the game. I pulled up the box score. Belmont had a 14-point halftime lead, and I think they had a pretty big lead at points in the second half. Irvine went nuts, won the game 92-84. Now, I'll say this again. I've said it a couple times. Like I know Jordan, who we had on the show, Jordan Alexander, who's really, solid Big West resource for us, likes UC Irvine going forward. But like I would argue, and I think he'd probably agree, like this is not last year's Irvine team. This is not Bent Luchin, being able to like do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And of course, his post defense was tremendous. His ability to score whenever Irvine needed a point was so huge. Like I don't know that Irvine has fully replaced that. So the other thing too, Rob, a kind of a revenge spot here for Belmont, because that was like a probably a win they felt like they could have against a very quality opponent that they got sort of ripped from them right at the end. So you got to think they want this one a little bit, but how difficult is it to go all the way out to Irvine to play this game? It does deserve time. Very interesting game. Man, I leaned Irvine on the spot before I kind of reminded myself of Belmont having that game won last year and then losing it right at the last second. I don't know. Definitely going to be a good one to watch.
Yeah, and real quick for the audience, just to put that last year's game into context here, the first half of that game was 39-25 Belmont, 64 total points scored in the first half. Irvine scored 67 by themselves in the second half. Irvine doesn't score 67 in a game sometimes. They got 67 in one half. So to your point about their ridiculously hot shooting, and that was, I feel like Casey Alexander at some point in time has made the firm decision to where if we're going to get to the next level in the MVC, if we're going to get back into the NCAA tournament, we've got to play some defense this year, guys. And they've done that. Honestly, to hold Toledo to 74 or 75 is an accomplishment for Belmont. So we'll see how it goes this year. I'm looking for the reverse of a high-scoring game. And again, that high-scoring game, somewhat of a fluke. Boy, 67.5 by Irvine is unheard of.
Yeah, that is absolutely going to be one to have an eye on. Should be a great game, and I'm definitely looking forward to that one. Listen, Garth, if you're going to donate to the show, I'll talk about what I'm going to have for dinner later. It's up to you. Like, that's your call. If you're gonna donate, we'll absolutely talk about it. Garth says, can we talk about a Saturday game quick? St. John's, Kentucky. St. John's opens a 2.5-point favorite. That seems like a gift. So I just got to see St. John's on Tuesday night. I went to Carnesecca Arena. In all these years, now I don't live anywhere near the city, but in all these years of being a New Yorker, I've lived in New York my entire life, either Albany or Syracuse area. And I've been down to the city a million times. For some reason, Rob, I never made it to Carnesecca Arena until Tuesday night. So that was awesome for me to finally get down there. I've seen many, many games at the Garden, but that was my first one at Carnesecca. The reason I bring that up is I got a nice up-close look at this St. John's team. And my actual takeaway from that game, Rob, was I felt I was more impressed with DePaul than I was St. John's. Now, obviously, St. John's won the game. DePaul covered the big number easily. And it kind of, I guess, confirmed my sort of like, I don't know if it's suspicion is the right word, but St. John's has been laying these massive numbers and has come nowhere near covering them. They laid 28.5 to Iona. And even though they won the game, Iona covered pretty easily. They laid 19.5 to DePaul. And even though they won the game, DePaul was never really in danger of not covering the 19.5. But the interesting part is then you see St. John's in these games where, they're either a slight favorite or a dog, that tends to be where I want to back St. John's, because for whatever reason, I think St. John's is overrated as like this elite team. I don't think this team is elite. I don't think they're as good as they were for a lot of the season last year. I certainly don't think they're a top 20 team nationally, which is where many people wanted to put them this season. But like, they're still pretty good. And, look at the couple of games, right? They beat Baylor. They knock off Ole Miss as a dog. They lose to Auburn, but like going back, that Alabama game, I think if I remember correctly, they led for a lot of that game and kind of gave it away at the end. That was a pretty impressive performance for them. So Garth's saying it's a gift. I don't know if I would ever use the term gift. But this game is not at Rupp, right? It's down in Georgia, neutral court. This is kind of where I'd rather have St. John's. I don't want St. John's as a 19-point home favorite, but I don't mind them as like a small dog or like a one-possession favorite on the neutral. So, Garth, I'm inclined to agree with you, but I want to see what Rob has to say about this one.
Yeah, I'm going to stand in that corner too here, Adam. And I think a lot of that has to do, and it's funny, we've been talking about coaches all week long that have no problem, getting in front of the microphone and throwing their team under the bus. Rick Pitino, somehow we left out of that conversation because you just think back to a couple of years ago at the end of the year when he's being interviewed and he said, I knew in the summer we weren't any good. So I mean, they never got anybody that year.
The least enjoyable experience of my career, he said at one point a couple of years ago.
So he has and I think that in these high profile games, he has a lot to do with their performance. I think he gets the most out of his guys. I'm going to speak from the Kentucky side here just for a minute, though, because remember, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, we're talking about Kentucky and the Mark Pope quotes. And Mark Pope stands in front of the press and says, we got a real problem here. I'm going to weed it out. We're going to clean it up. We're going to get it right. He was basically saying that his players were effortless. And he blamed it on himself without naming Kentucky player names. But he said he was going to straighten it out. It didn't happen right away. Now, the problem is what to make of the win against Indiana. Is it a sign that Mark Pope has the team heading in the right direction, or is it just a sign that they won a game at home against Indiana? And I'm inclined to believe that I need to see it more than one time before I believe that Kentucky is that team. Key matchup here, St. John's, of course, we know loves to turn teams over. Kentucky's got pretty good ball handlers. They don't turn it over much. But again, if I'm looking for toughness, if I'm looking for a team that's going to get under the other team's skin in this particular game on a neutral in front of a big audience, then I want St. John's. And I want Pitino as the head coach over Pope. So I would probably lean towards St. John's as well. They're a little bit better shot makers than they were last year, because last year they couldn't throw it in the ocean. And that doesn't mean that they're great this year, but they do enough to cover a 2.5 point number. So we'll see where that number goes to. But I would say at this point in time, I'd be on St. John's.
Remember yesterday how I told you that like there's certain people, like I was talking about some of my like city buddies, like if they can say something that I could not say, like it would come out so wrong if it came out of my mouth. But there's just something about this like North Jersey, if you've got that like sort of NYC like Italian accent, like you can get away with saying a lot, like and Pitino is that guy. Like yesterday, he's going on, or when his last press conference, I think after the DePaul game, he's going on. He must have went on and on about. He's like, listen, if Bryce Hopkins was just a completely different human being, he'd be like one of the best players in the country. But like, he's got to be a completely different human, because I mean, like the most backhanded compliment ever. And like, listen, Bryce Hopkins is really good, but what he was essentially saying was like, he's got to like be a man. Like he gets pushed around out there a little bit. He's got to take over and really assert himself, and he's not doing that. And like, but like Pitino says it, and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. But like anyone else said that, they'd be like, man, that was kind of mean. Like he just came out and and he went through like his whole roster. He went through his whole roster, and it was like, well, if I think if Zuby had like a jump shot, he'd be a great player, right? He basically said he can't shoot, and yet Pitino can do it and get results. So yeah, I think you're onto something there.
You know what? It's so true, because growing up 45 minutes outside of New York City in Connecticut's Fairfield County, you can say that type of stuff in New York City because of the hardened attitude that goes along with that city. But you drop those comments somewhere in the Midwest and you do get hurt feelings or something. So he's the right guy in the right place. And I think his team responds to him in these high profile games. I really do.
All right, we're going to do one more Saturday game really quick because, again, you got to get if you're going to donate to the show, it's very much appreciated, and we're going to get to your game. So we'll do this one, and then Rob and I will each close out our parlay league. I think we can do that in 10 minutes. So, Rob, I'll let you kick this one off. He says, might try my luck as well. North Carolina is a 3.5-point favorite against Ohio State on Saturday. Am I wrong for thinking Ohio State can win outright? Talk to me a little bit. UNC Ohio State. Do you have an opinion on this one yet?
Yeah, I don't think it's wrong at all to think that Ohio State can win outright. We mentioned the other day, we went through North Carolina in depth about how maybe Jim was on the show. I don't know if it was you or Jim, Adam.
It was Jim because I was listening as I was avoiding like 3 accidents driving through Philly traffic. So I remember it well. Yeah.
Basically the evolution of North Carolina as a basketball team this year to where they run 3-6-11s across the front line, and it's not impossible, but it's much more difficult to get to the rim. They're not as high a scoring team. They're not the high flying team that Hubert Davis has had, that most UNC coaches have had in the past. So they're a different style. That being said, I don't trust them to score. And I do trust Ohio State to score. I mean, they've obviously got the players. They've obviously got the ability, and they've picked up their pace a little bit. I think if it was often said, I mean, it's actually a college basketball adage where fast-paced teams don't like to be pushed tempo-wise. And in this instance, I'm going to reverse that because I don't know that UNC knows this particular group doesn't know how to handle teams that might push back against them. And I think Ohio State will try it here. If I'm dependent on buckets, I want the Ohio State starting 5. I don't want the UNC starting 5. I get the defense and the transition, all this stuff. Maybe that leads you to an underplay, but the question is about side. And I don't think you're totally off base thinking that Ohio State could win outright. I certainly think plus 3.5 is a pretty good take with that side.
All right, just in the interest of time and getting a couple more games in, I'm going to move on to I'll give out a client play here. And at some point, I mean, I guess like yesterday's did win for us on the show with Jackson State at the number it was at. I have a slightly better number than the market on this one right now, but it's still very much playable. I took Florida Atlantic tonight out in Moraga, California against St. Mary's. Took them plus 14.5. You can still get a 14 at Caesars, and pretty much everywhere else you can get 13.5 right now. The reason I like Florida Atlantic is I think Mikey Lewis may miss this game. And if he does play, I'm not sure he's 100%. So I lost over the weekend. I had St. Mary's. I played the money line when it got down to minus 130. They played Boise on one of those neutral court games that isn't really a neutral. The game was in Idaho Falls. So it was kind of a regional home game for Boise. And I kind of got shafted in that game by Mikey Lewis getting hurt. He tried to play, but he only played 9 minutes. He didn't score a single point. Anyone that watches St. Mary's basketball knows that that's not the norm. Mikey Lewis, 15.3 points per game for St. Mary's. Not arguably, I would say he's the best guard on the team. I would say he's, probably one of St. Mary's 2 to 3 best players. He is their best 3-point shooter from a percentage standpoint, 44.8% from 3 on the season. If he's at all compromised here, that's a big issue, in my opinion, for St. Mary's. And I'm saying that because it was a big issue for them on Sunday against Boise State. They end up losing a game by 1 that I think if he doesn't get hurt, they're winning pretty easily. Because, again, they had the ball down 1 with a chance to win on the last possession. And, if he doesn't get hurt or if he contributes at all, I think St. Mary's wins that game. So the other thing here is like Florida Atlantic was a team I had kind of circled coming into the season as a team that I thought would be undervalued in their conference. They've got some size that can go against St. Mary's here. And I do think St. Mary's gets they get a huge bump when they play at home. And the thing with St. Mary's, and I've said this all year, if you can get them out of a little bit out of what they want to do you're going to cover big numbers against them. And so there's two things working in our favor here tonight. One, Florida Atlantic has the bigs to sort of like not let St. Mary's just do whatever they want offensively. And two, if Mikey Lewis does not play, that number is totally off. I say if he gets ruled out and it becomes public knowledge, I would say that number is probably like 11 and a half, not 14 and a half. So I'm just asking the Owls to keep it close. I played Florida Atlantic plus 14 and a half, 3% play, and that will be my leg of the parlay. Someone says fade Adam on everything. Yeah, to this point, but I don't know if you want to do that going forward. I feel like you've missed your chance to fade me. I don't think that's smart going forward. I've got to have a little run in my favor on client plays. So I will say, Kevin Lee, if you faded me to this point, go buy like a fucking car or something or whatever you want. Like you're killing it. I don't know if that's the move going forward. Go ahead, Rob. What are you going to close out the parlay with?
I'm going to close up. I'm going to go to the added board. And, this, if we get it right, Adam, we'll close out a 5-0 week with these parlay plays. So let's go back to what's been working. Team total here, Southeast Louisiana at LSU. Bayou probably could direct me in the right direction here, but I don't see Keith up there with a post on this one. But LSU's team total here, Adam, is 83.5. It just seems excessively low to me. They've gone over 83.5 7 times this year, and especially when they're facing this type of opponent in this caliber of opponent, they've just piled on the points. I happen to be a big fan of Deedon Thomas, the ex-UNLV point guard. The front line here for LSU has been pretty good. They're off of a big win against SMU where they scored 89. Matt McMahon's team has shot the ball extremely well all season long. Number 30 in effective field goal percentage across the country. A lot of that damage done against teams like this, Southeast Louisiana. And then they did it against a better team in SMU last time out. But there's a little bit of in-state stuff here, which leads me to believe that on a Friday night, LSU will want to roll up some points here. It's an offensive-minded team. For Southeast Louisiana, asset is they can turn teams over. They probably won't turn LSU over. Negatives against them, they don't offensive rebound, a lot of one and outs, and they don't shoot the ball whatsoever. And so it's just going to add to the possession chances for LSU here. I think they'll get to the foul line quite a bit. Better athletes. 83.5, I was surprised. I was thinking more towards the 90 mark. I think that's where they'll get to. So give me LSU team total over 83.5 tonight against Southeastern Louisiana.
Love that. You've been great with the team totals. And I fully expect that you get another one home here. Yeah, we've had a good week with the parlays. We're back up plus 4.06 units on the season on these, which is basically just $1 for every for every $1. If you were to play them equally, equals $4.06. I apologize for ruining Tuesday's parlay from the car with Maris, because you guys would have hit a 2-teamer on that one. But I think we're going to get it home here. I'm going to quickly, because I've been told I don't promo enough on this show. So I will say that like football has been awesome for me. As much as I've struggled to this point in the year in college basketball, that has not been the case on the gridiron. I went 2-0 in the NFL again last weekend, 5%er on the Bills. I got another 5%er this weekend. So Rob, it's like the gambling gods are like, listen, we're going to kick your teeth in with like every bad beat imaginable in college hoop. And we're going to also make it so you give out plays to your clients, but then all the ones you come on the show and talk about win. But in exchange for that, we're going to let you have a good football season. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm ahead in both college and NFL, and I'm hoping that the gambling gods let me keep that going, especially on Sunday when I have a 5% play. Anything to promo quick at the gun for you?
Yeah, real quick this weekend, don't forget the full court press package that's available from WagerTalk.com. You can get mine and Adam's college hoop plays all weekend long at a reduced rate. Currently on a 9-2 college hoop run. It's been a good month, the month of December, 27-15 all along. Also NFL-wise, number 2 ranked at WagerTalk as far as profit is concerned. So a lot of good reasons, a lot of huge package discounts over at WagerTalk.com with bowl season, NFL down the stretch, NBA, college hoop. A lot to choose from, guys. You can get great savings over at WagerTalk.com.
Real quick, 2-teamer tonight's going to be FAU plus 14, and then Rob is going with LSU team total over 83.5, standard plus 260 on that 2-teamer. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Check out those packages. We'll see you guys Monday morning at 10 a.m.